Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, people.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
MashaAllah. Alhamdulillah, we got Dr. Imad here as normal. I'm here. I'm Habib, by the way. And today we have Shaykh Bilal Mustafa as well. Shaykh Bilal has studied the full Alim course like Imad and I. And this is like a complex course. It's very interesting. I think once upon a time we were planning to actually go through what we go through in that course. It's very interesting, the different things which that course is made up of. It's full-time 6-year course, and that's what Bilal Mustafa studied. And also, as well as that, during his time while he was doing that course, he also completed the recitation of the Quran according to the way it's recited by all 7 Imams. So usually when most of us learn to read the Quran, we learn just one of the narrations. But Bilal has, mashallah, mastered all 7 of them, subhanallah. But anyway, alhamdulillah, we've got Bilal here today. And inshallah, he'll be joining in our discussions with his insights based on his studies, inshallah. How is everyone anyway? Bilal, how are you, man? How's your day been?
Alhamdulillah, bro. It's been a fantastic day, fantastic week. Just been excited to join you two, Shaykh, my Shaykh, on this beautiful platform.
Alhamdulillah. Okay, so just to get started, there was one topic which we left it off at the end of last lesson, which was the concept of knowing being the enemy of learning. So in order to kind of bring more of a awareness of this concept, I think one of the most useful things to do is actually practically try and see if we can notice how this shows up in something which we do. And the way that we do that is when we're in a state of learning, we have an amount of curiosity. So we're interested in something. We're not thinking, oh, I know everything, so I don't need to know. There's a state of curiosity and of learning. So the one really easy way to bring this to attention is just to bring attention to anything. It could be the most simple thing. So we're going to start off with the breath. Bilal, Imad, are you ready? So the first thing is is the breath itself. So this is something, when I mention this, you might be like, oh, I know how to breathe. Breathing is like normal. But when you actually bring attention here, there might be this element of knowing going on. Like, I know about my breath because I do it all the time and it's part of me. And that may be like limiting the amount of curiosity you could have. So, and then you could actually feel your breath. So take a breath in through your nose. And this is one of the simplest ways to bring that attention to the breath. And see if you can actually do that. Like, bring attention to the breath while it's coming in through your nose. And that same attention to the breath when you're breathing out. And like,
he's got
one of the things.
here.
No, but one of the things which is so interesting here that you realize is the point isn't to think about how you're breathing, but the point is to actually engage in that practice. And if you're thinking, then try and see if you can just notice the thought rather than being the thought so much. And when you notice the thought, then you could do this amazing thing of trying to figure out who it is that's doing the noticing. And that obviously allows you to be a little bit more separate from your thoughts. And maybe from this state now, maybe just thinking about where we are, what we're about to talk about, and how even just the fact that we're here, all 3 of us, and all of our beautiful audience are here, mashallah, just to listen to the podcast. So we're here, me, Bilal, and Imad are kind of here to kind of talk about the podcast. So even when we think of that, it might be that in the back of our mind, we might be worried about, what we're going to talk about, what we're going to say. But what do you think, Bilal? What's going on? What did anything kind of come up there?
I think what you were saying was interesting. Like, it comes back to that point where if we ascribe a noun to something, then immediately we stop thinking about that thing. So we think what we're doing here, what if we just said podcast, then we just think that's it. Yeah, it's a podcast, end of story. It's not 3 people coming together discussing stuff, and then what are they discussing maybe, and then how are they discussing it, the many sort of things that maybe went into this whole thing. We miss that whole concept and part out when we do ascribe nouns to things. I think is that where you were like alluding towards.
Yeah, I think that's very true. I think that's kind of what can happen very easily. And when we do that, we actually miss out part of the experience. And I think one of the things with babies is that babies, they are happy to kind of become so involved in the process that they forget even why they're doing it. So, like, as adults, I think very often when we're talking with adults, they kind of seem very keen to do something because it gets you somewhere else. So you go and tell somebody something because they need to know.
What are we
But if you
talking
tell
about, babies?
but if you tell a baby,
Because
if you tell a kid,
there's some news to give today. Just give the news, man. Let's get that out of the way.
everyone should know the news,
A
man.
few days ago, Sheikh Habib has had his first child, alhamdulillah. So he has a baby. So he's in baby mode at the moment. That's why he wants to finish the podcast early today as well. And it's so deep. It's so deep. It's a lot of breathing because he's been probably looking at his child, mashallah, and he saw the first breath of life of the child. Did you? Subhanallah, just the breathing thing is just. Alhamdulillah, Allah barik fiqh. May Allah give your son a long life. May He give him knowledge. May He not make him the enemy of learning. And inshallah, may He make him a means of your entry into paradise.
Ameen. Jazakallah khair. Qasmi, man. Babies are complex, man. Complex things.
Has the baby been keeping you up at night? Cry at night a lot.
Yeah, he cries at night. But his mum usually deals with it at night time. She's on duty. Yeah.
When are you got day shift?
Not at night time.
He splits it up.
We don't split the night time. I usually just do stuff in the daytime.
Do you clean bottles?
Clean bottles. It depends what there is to do, man.
What's the sense of responsibility though now? Like, have you seen it shoot right up, or is are you still like just normal, like life's normal, or?
Yeah, man. It's difficult to explain though, isn't it? Like, I think in terms of that, one of the things which I realize, because I think quite a bit about my own life anyway. So when you think about a baby, like, obviously you want like the best for them. Yeah. But you're going to have to stick with me here for a minute. So usually for your kids, you want the best for them. But when we think of ourselves, we also want the best for ourselves. But we think of it in different ways. So when you think about your kid, you think of the character traits he needs to have, like how he needs to be. You think of more or less everything. Like you completely envision him as an adult based on reality. But when you start thinking like that, then you realize that if you want your kid to be like that, how's that going to happen? The main way is for you to have some of those qualities. Like if you want your child to be connected to Allah, like you have to be connected to Allah yourself. Otherwise, it's not going to like magically come to the kid. But that's obviously one of the main ways to get that thing into the kid. And so that process of thinking about how you want your kid to be, it actually redefines how you actually want to be for yourself. There's simple characteristics which are actually then become more important, if that makes any sense. Like, because you actually think beyond the limits of what you've set on yourself. Did that make any sense?
Sort of, yeah.
I'm confusing. I'm being too confusing, man.
He's got that fatherly wisdom about him now, Imad, I think. That fatherly wisdom that was lacking many years ago when we first met. Allah.
So what did you call your son in the end? Imad or Imadan or Imdad or?
Yeah, you know what? Humaid was on the short list. I liked Humaid names. But number one was Minhaj.
MashaAllah.
But I'm not 100% sure yet. It should be Minhaj. Depends.
Nahj al-Balagha.
Minhaj, man. It depends how you understand Minhaj. It's interesting with names, man, because very often, like people like kind of have to make an interpretation to make sense of the meaning. Like especially if the name doesn't make sense on its own. So with Minhaj, it's kind of like...
Why Minhaj? Was it random? Was it a form of revelation, a form of insight, or...
A form of revelation. Look at that, Imad.
No, like intuition.
Intuition,
Um,
absolutely.
I don't know, man. You stick to it, innit? I guess everyone. I've known a couple of. I've not known that many people known Minhaj, but the ones that I do kind of. I don't know, man. The name suited them.
Everyone's
So
name suits them, though. Everyone's name is a proper noun, and they've been named that before Khalq. Assalamu alaikum, niece. Is this the same niece that always comes up?
yeah,
Different one.
We've got
Assalamu
a fourth one for the show
She can't hear
today.
me. She can't hear me because she can see
oh
me
yeah,
talking towards her.
he's talking to you. Imad, Uncle Imad is talking to you. Say assalamu alaikum to Uncle Imad. Assalamu alaikum. You're not gonna say assalamu alaikum to Uncle Imad.
Walaikum salam.
It's Uncle Bilal. There's two uncles today. Uncle Imad, Uncle Bilal.
Uncle An.
Anyway, we've got lots of comments coming in, mashallah. Beautiful
What they're
comment.
saying.
People are saying
Habib looks more fatherly. One Sahil says.
a minute. Habib
Abu
looks more fatherly.
Minhaj. Sahil is Abu Minhaj. The Sahil goes
Minhaj,
to Habib,
man, Minhaj.
Abu what?
As I
Abu-
get older, okay, excuse me, can we listen now?
I told you that. I said to put a kunya.
As I get older, I realize that 30 years ago, I had no idea who I would be today. It is even harder when you apply this type of prediction to your children. Yeah, man, and that's another thing. Like the prediction for children. So we do have a vision for who we want our children to be. But like, are you meant to like kind of force them into? Are you kind of meant to beat them into that kind of vision, or is the child meant to kind of unfold as a being of themselves?
The latter.
Yeah, and I think sometimes
definitely
we become so obsessed with what we think the child should be that we kind of what do you call you repress the reality of the child in his authentic self.
Once this is an interesting point actually. About a teacher, Shaykh Mufti Shabbir. You know, he teaches in Darul Blackburn now. He once mentioned, and Nur Muhammad, if you ever watch this in the future, because now Sheikh Nur Muhammad is somewhere in the wilderness with no technology, but I know he will watch these in the future. You know, when he returns in probably a year's time. So I don't know if you remember Nur. It was me and Nur were there, and he said something that
Nur Muhammad, the one who went
why.
to the Akram Nadwi course.
India.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Muhammad Al-Hindi, Al-Saharan Furi, somewhere
I
in the
know
wilderness.
him well, alhamdulillah.
Yeah, he's somewhere in the wilderness right now. So he's in Jamaat. So basically, me and him were there once for some reason I can't remember. And Mufti Shabbir was saying that he said in Urdu that you can always kind of want something for your children, right? He said that tadbir insan تدبير इंसान तकदीर इलाही के ताबे है. It's deep. So he said that we can make an effort. Like,
can you say the Urdu again, and then actually translate it slowly?
Okay.
That's deep, man. Please slow down.
So he said, تدبير insan, the scheme or the plans of a human being that we have, the plans and the projects that we want to do, and we want to kind of have for our children or for other people. And in this context, it was actually for children and the parents and the children. He said that it needs to correspond, in order for it to be successful, it needs to correspond to the taqdeer ilahi, which is the kind of the decree of Allah. So Allah has to decree it, the divine decree. And what he meant there is, and he gave an example. He said, look, there's so many children in the madrasa and Darul Uloom who are so intelligent. They memorize all the books. They come first position in the exam out of like 50 students, you know. But their parents don't have a clue. You know, their parents, you know, haven't really kind of put them in the situation where, you know, they've optimized their learning and they got them there. That was the taqdeer of Allah. But at the same time, there's so many parents who do everything with their children. They get extra tutors, you know, they force them to kind of learn, they stay with them, they sit with them, and they still can't do it. Why? Because
so would you say there's like so would you say there's like there'd be a separate route through academia? Like you don't have to go through academia. Like you could, if you focus a bit less and stop being forced to do what parents think that you should do, by means of that you might end up doing what you're actually born to do. Does that make sense? Because by being forced into certain, like being a doctor or engineer, which is considered in certain cultures to be just better than everyone else, then would by forcing someone down that route, you're actually depriving them of becoming their true self. Would that be true?
Okay, I think that's a separate point to what we were mentioning, conventional education, and how you don't. Of course, I think conventional education, I don't think is a bad thing, for us to have the facility to learn, but ideally, you would want kind of this natural type of learning where it's receptive to what you're good at, and perhaps but I don't think loads of people have the resources to even achieve that. So it might be difficult. You mean like things like homeschooling? So I always have this conversation with my friends as well. We had it very recently about homeschooling children and the benefits versus the problems of homeschooling children. So I think the benefits would be, you get to, obviously there's a curriculum which we work towards, but you get to decide how you deliver that curriculum to your child. And you can, augment their learning with you want to teach them Quran and Arabic and all these.
What do you mean? There's a curriculum?
So,
as in for the GCSEs. So you'd aim
GCSE in KS2, like Key Stage 2. There's a curriculum, all children should be on a certain level at this in terms of literacy and stuff, reading age. Obviously, children, who kind of can surpass that and go into a higher stage really early. For example, reading and writing. These sort of things, children by the age of 6 or 7 should be able to kind of write their ideas and be able to express their ideas in a written format, and then they should be able to build their vocabulary. And by the age of probably 11, they should be able to do the basic operations in maths, addition, subtraction, division, and be able to kind of do a few complex problems. And then later on, when they're perhaps from 11 to 13, this is obviously the national curriculum in this country.
So what is it designed to do, though? What is the education system really designed to do?
I think, this is a big question. It all comes down to the ontology of education.
Yeah, this is the problem.
My God. Is that the 7th week? Is that the 7th week he's done that?
Okay, let's go through a few of the comments. Bilal, do you want to read some of the comments?
Yeah, go on then.
Go on
Shoaib Abdullah says, Hayyakum Allahu Jami'an. So, yeah, thank you very much. Sahil said, do what you want, follow your dreams, and parents should respect that. That's a great point, to be honest. You definitely see, especially with madrasa, I think we've all seen it as well. 90%, I'd say, and you could say that's an exaggeration, but 90% of the students were just there because they had to be there. They didn't want to be there. I mean, and that created a backlog of loads of problems within these respective
institutions. It affects the environment, doesn't it?
Yeah, so then you have scholars coming out who don't actually want to be scholars, and then it's just, like you said, it's massive.
Also, in terms of the environment, it affects the standards inside. Because if, imagine you've got 10 people in medical school and they all want to become doctors, they're all going to study about their medical curriculum. But if you've got 10 people in a classroom who only the 1 out of 10, like Bilal just said, would actually want to be there, the rest of them are going to look for every excuse to not study. And that has a big effect on the standards, I think.
I think if I relate this back to myself, maybe it's counterintuitive to what we're saying, because I can remember when I first started madrasa, I didn't want to be there. And I find the good circumstances that, my parents made the decision at the time, where, I should kind of be there. And I'm in that sort of education at 11 years old. I was 11 years old. I really wanted to be at home. And then obviously I disagree now in certain aspects of it. I think, children at 11 years old, they shouldn't be at a boarding school. Obviously, if there's some kind of extenuating circumstance, then maybe. But in general, I think children should be at home at that age. But I think when I was 16, when I finished my hifz and everything, and I was ready to study, the dean study Arabic and enroll on this Alimiya course that we did, I think that was my decision. And that was kind of, my parents were like, okay, fair enough. You can do whatever you want. We're not going to stop you. Even for example, people think as well, I'm studying medicine at the moment. My parents didn't even really care if whatever I did, as long as, I was doing something, or, something that was to the best of my abilities, something that, I would work hard for. I think they didn't really mind, right?
That's the thing, Imad. I think because you had that option, a lot of people don't have that option. Maybe that's why. Even myself, I look at myself as well. my parents just said, do what you want to do and what makes you happy. And then I went and did this course. I went and did HIVD, etc. And with other people, they don't have that option. It is only this one option they have. So maybe you're saying that you're being counterintuitive, but you're actually on this side more than that side because you had a choice in the end.
I had a choice in the end, but in the beginning, for example, do you trust an 11-year-old to do whatever they want with their life? Is an 11-year-old gonna tell you, "Oh yeah,
Of course,
I want to be a footballer"? Okay, fair enough. You can train them. You can put them in. They think, "Oh, I want to be an astronaut." Yeah, mashallah. I'll train you with this and that, whatever. But their perception of what they're gonna do is gonna be from the things that they consume around them, the television media that they consume.
But I would say babies are probably more likely to make more accurate.
So the baby's gonna cry. You're gonna respond to the baby. Babies are mashallah. They've got some amr. They've got some.
No. But I would say that the point which I made at the beginning is that adults would tend to forget and pretend they don't have dreams, whereas babies that won't happen, because babies will actually say the truth. Like if they want to be an astronaut, they will try and become an astronaut, and they might not be on the moon, but they might work for SpaceX. They might be an engineer for SpaceX. They might be an apprentice at SpaceX. They'll just get somewhere.
Habib mentioned a lot about SpaceX. Yeah, he just 3 times in a row. Should we move on to Elon Musk or something?
Now, but the point is,
Elon Musk became the richest person in the world a few days ago.
Yeah. So the point is,
I think he's nearly there. It's not that he's.
No. A few days ago, he got there.
Oh, wow.
No, but the point, Imad. So the point is, like, so. Should they? So if a child wants to become a footballer, then what should they do then? Should they still focus on academic studies, like as if they're going to be important for them?
Okay, so this is the question was earlier. Just to go back to the actual question, we were saying children should be left. Sahil said let children do whatever they want. The parents should kind of be subdued to what the child thinks. But the question was, do you trust an 11-year-old to decide through their minimal experience of the world what is best for them?
I think best? If
okay, let's do you decide.
But let's bring the context back to making a big decision, like which school you go to or which uni you go to, something like that. Because I think it's different to say, do they go and sleep in a caravan like outside Poundland and smoke drugs all day? That's different to going to a school.
Okay, I think So
as long as they're going to a school,
let's rephrase it. Let's reimagine and redesign this kind of question in the sense that 11-year-old versus let's say 18-year-old. That's 2 different points. An 18-year-old will have a decent perception of the world. They'll have a decent idea of right and wrong and probability and kind of what they want to do. Maybe you can't force an 18-year-old. They haven't seen the world enough to kind of decide this is what career I want in my life. This is what I want to do in my life. But they'll have a lot better idea than an 11-year-old would. 11-year-old wants sweets. They can eat sweets all day.
But I think somebody who truly enjoys their career will very likely show that in their childhood. I think in childhood we show our true self much more than, and if you actually want to know where you're going in life, a good indication is actually studying your own kind of baby years. And what you're interested in.
It's funny. So I read a lot of medical school personal statements that people write every single year for the past 4 or 5 years. I've been reviewing so many dozens, and a very cliche thing in there is, I wanted to do medicine since I was 2 years old, since I was 3 years old, since I can remember. Right? It's a very cliche thing, but no, you didn't. You didn't know the implications of what
medicine. They're playing that game, doctor. They're playing that game.
The game doctor doesn't mean you want to commit yourself to dermatology, ophthalmology, and a certain niche space.
I think it does a bit. I think you might be underestimating the effect of those little choices. Even if you don't want to commit, it might become a hobby. Like
I think what you do.
So how else do you decide?
Okay,
so how else do you decide that what you want to do with your life, though?
I'm not saying.
I think one of the main things are those things you do as kids.
Of course, that's not absolute. I'm saying that's not absolute. That no one ever knew what they wanted to do. That's not absolute. I'm saying it's not the majority.
I would say kids are more kind of aware of what they truly want than adults who kind of had it beaten up.
They're aware of what's available to them. For example, what's the famous saying? A person who hasn't traveled, their mother is the best cook. That's what it's a saying, isn't it? Well, obviously, I think my mom is the best cook because I have traveled. But in general, the saying is not indicating about the food or anything, about the cuisine.
Bilal, do you get what I'm saying here?
The
You
saying
made a
is,
point.
what
You were
I'm saying
way
something
back.
else, man. I'm saying something else here.
No, what I thought is
I get you. No, I get deep.
what the question I understood was what the decisions that they make. It's based on kind of what they decided to do as a child, and they can make a good conscious choice as a child.
Yeah.
But
In
I'm
fact,
saying
I would say
their
that.
choices are going to be guided by what's available to them in terms of media, in terms of the people around them. So how do they know that there
Also, in
was
terms of,
something else
but
which is better for them
I think
and they liked it later on?
as you get older, I think this is the point I was making. This is that slightly complex point, which I asked Bilal if he understood it, and he kind of, I'm not sure whether he did. But you know, when you think about, so for example, when I think about myself, what I want to achieve for myself, I've got a vision for my own future. Yeah, what I think I'm going to do. It's a bit fuzzy, but whatever. But when I make a vision for my kid, yeah, based on reality, it's much bigger. Like you expect to achieve so much more. Yeah, and I think one of the reasons for that is because for myself, I've got these kind of limitations. Like I think based on my experiences that this is the limit, this is the limit, and this is how you can and can't do things. And that actually becomes, whereas a child would not have a lot of those limitations. That's what I'm saying. So in true terms of deciding what you really want to do, a child would not see the limitations of, like, if he wants to become an astronaut, he'll pursue that and try and become, he might not actually become an astronaut, but because of his pursuit of it, he might become part of a company which builds rockets, or he might be like a photo taker of rockets, or he might be an interviewer about rocket scientists or something.
So you're
Does that make
saying,
sense?
okay, so the person who aims for the stars will at least hit somewhere, at least go to the
I
sky.
think so.
Fair enough. Yeah, I think that having high ambitions, lofty ambitions, I think it's a mawdu hadith, but the saying is still correct. Ulul himma min al iman. Having these lofty ambitions, it's not the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam didn't say it, Allahu alam, but some pious people said it afterwards, and some people ascribe it to the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but it's not hadith. That being of lofty ambitions, being an ambitious person, right? It's part of what a believer does. It's part of being a believer, because a believer, aims for the best. Whatever in what they, because Allah created them in the best of forms. لقد خلقنا الإنسان في أحسن تقويم. قال الله تبارك وتعالى بعد أن نقول أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم.
Okay, anyway, brother D-Mac is saying they will naturally look for guidance in you without even realizing it. And then he says a tip, which is always show love even when you're at your lowest. Then Sahil said his thing. Neil came. Bilal, do you want to do some more? Do you want to go through some comments or give some input? Well, Imad stays quiet.
I was just thinking, like, everything that you were saying. I think you said the point of, like, how from what our personal experience we like transmit that on other people, and then the little thing just clicked with the whole philosophical argument with Plato's cave. I think Imad, you might be aware of it, where there's a cave and there's people that were born in this cave and they were prisoners in this cave, and what happens is they're facing a wall, and behind them is like a window, and they've just grown up in this cave. Okay, so many years have passed, and all they've seen is this one wall, and on this wall there's like shadows that pass because people pass by this window and they create shadows, and they see shadows of dogs or human beings or babies, and they think that these shadows are reality. And then after many years, one person, he escapes this cave and he goes out to the real world, and he sees he sees the real people and the shadows following them. And now he's really confused, and someone tells him that in fact the shadows are fake, or not fake, but they're not the essence of life.
They are the tabi of the people.
They're the target of the people. Exactly. The people are the real thing, right? So now this one man, he goes back to his cave, and there's two others that were in the cave with him, and he tells them this whole scenario that, look, these shadows are actually real life, and there's a big world out there. It's massive. There's a sun that illuminates everything, and because of that, these shadows are created. These two, knowing only this little bit of information they had since birth, they completely disregard him and they shove him away. And even though he wants to free them, they don't let him free them. And it's like that. Like so we place these locks on our minds ourselves. A child is free from these locks. He's seeing everything. He's learning. He's taking in so much. We're the ones that have gone through hardships or certain pathways in life, and we've limited ourselves because of that, and now we're limiting these children as well. I think that's what I took up from it anyway. So Plato's allegory of the cave, philosophical argument.
but again, Habib, I'd like to kind of semi-disagree with you there, as I always do. But actually, most of the time, I do agree with you most of the time. When sometimes I disagree. What I think as well, you can't really say that every experience of a human being tells you that it employs a limit to something, right? I think sometimes people learn through experience that this might be not the best way to do it, and that's why kind of they try to kind of push their child in a certain direction based on their own experiences. I'm not saying that's correct, but I think that's a valid way of thinking. So say a person they
It's a safe way of thinking. It's not the best way of thinking, though. It's a safe. I'll give you that. It's a safe way of thinking. It isn't the most like concrete, solid.
I think, and one of the things I would want my child to be. Okay, let me give one example.
I think if you want to stay safe, though, if you want to stay safe,
so I would want my child to be a risk taker. I'd want him to be brave. Yeah, to take risks. But personally, if you actually looked at my life, it would look like I don't actually. Most human beings don't have that embedded in their kind of DNA. They would believe that it's wrong to take risks, and that's an example of something which might be passed on to kids. Whereas kids, as babies, would actually they wouldn't be that scared of reality, but we learn that as a belief. Does that make sense?
There's another hadith based on what you just said. الشبابة شعبة من الجنون. The youth is a period of insanity. Youth, the children and people who are youthful, they are the risk takers, and it's embedded within them to be risk takers.
So isn't that a good thing?
As in, it's an observation, isn't it? I don't know about
it is just an observation, yeah.
Yeah,
I would say
I don't.
Yeah, but then, but this is one of those things which, like, this is the issue which I see. Like, sometimes with ourselves, we might think that taking risks is good, but we wouldn't actually, try and nurture that and practice that. Whereas with a kid, you would. So that's what I meant by thinking about your kid's vision. You actually realize your own vision in more clarity.
I think I think you're talking about being scared of failure, and that's why you don't do things. Yeah, that. To be honest, I would describe myself as a risk taker probably, because I'm still one of the shabab. I think in terms of I always fail at things. Or even today, I had an exam today, right? We had a COVID test in the morning.
But I wouldn't say But I wouldn't say you're an issue. Obviously, clearly, you don't have this much of a problem. This is obviously on a scale, yeah. And there's intent.
I think everyone has a problem, though. Everyone has a problem of that feedback. I'll tell you what happened today. So we had a COVID test and we had to sit the exam. So the exam wasn't a written exam; it was a practical exam. So you go into multiple different stations, and the 5-minute stations, you have to do different things. So I remember all of them were really good, except for one just went so bad. I went in the room, and literally I got everything wrong, and I realized at the end, oh no. And that feeling, of like, your heart kind of just drops, that kind of feeling. I felt that for a bit, and then I was going out the room and going to the next room, and I thought, you know what, these exams are designed in such a way that the guy before you doesn't know how you did in the station. The guy in front of you doesn't know your future station doesn't know the kind of score of your last station. So they're mutually exclusive. So then just go in there with a positive head and a confidence that you can do really well on the second chance. And I think that turnover is what kind of people need. That you shouldn't let the hard feeling of failure carry on to your next pursuit. That's a metaphor right there. It's a metaphor in life. That you should, if you have like a failure, why drag it on to the next thing? Because this thing that you did compared to the next thing, they're two completely different things. So then why not start again and try and realize your mistakes and try and approach it in a different angle, be confident, go for it. This is kind of a good way of thinking, I think, a good philosophy to have. Aiming high rather than kind of using negativity.
But that's what the people that you were saying before, those that limit themselves like that, the fathers or the families, parents control them. They've not got that capability to go out and try these things and fail. They're just in a box. There is no failure in that box, which is what we were trying to say before.
But I although I semi-agree with that, I don't think that's absolute. I think sometimes parents have a good intention, and through their experiences, they actually do know what's good for their child, because they know their child, and they know that perhaps a particular thing won't be good enough, won't be good for their child. For example, a person, you have a young boy, and he really wants to kind of be a DJ, at 9, 10 years old, and perhaps the mom and dad know that a life as a DJ for a Muslim child isn't a suitable life. There's loads of like drugs, alcohol, and all these other kind of vices surrounding this career. So they will try and encourage their child not to pursue that path based on their experience of the world. And now, if you say child knows best, then are you going to let him? Is that responsible as a parent to him? Yeah, he'll do it. He'll learn and he'll come back. Or do you put in that guidance? And then, what is the role of a parent?
But what is guidance? You need to define what is it. So maybe explain rather than just cut them off at the dream, which is what we will see happen. People just get cut off. No, you can't do that. Shush, do this instead. Rather than explaining that, okay, look, in our deen, there's certain things we shouldn't really. These things are attributed in this industry. It's not going to be great for you. Explain. Yeah, it is an 11-year-old, but they do have a brain and they do catch on really quick. They have a concept of Allah. They know that there's rules and regulations. So that's
something which will have to come from the parents. If spirituality is important to you, then you're going to have to teach spirituality to your kids. And based all their decisions, if they're your kids, all their decisions should be from their spiritual center, from their core, not from necessarily their mind so much, if that makes any sense. Because if you've taught them to be connected to Allah, they will check, like, does Allah kind of commend these kind of actions? That will be one of the first things they'll check. If they're your kids, then that should be one of the first things which comes into their mind.
I mean, what if a parent tried so hard to kind of embody these things into their child, but then it didn't work out? Remember we said earlier, على الإنسان أن يتدبر وعلى الله أن يتقدر.
But it's not a bad thing. I don't think that would be a hypothetical situation, but the responsibility would be for the parent to try. If based on that, we know even prophets didn't necessarily have their kids all become Muslims and become like really pious. Some of the prophets had children who were the leaders of the opposition against Islam. So again, that's kind of a burden of the shoulder. But I think that the discussion is more how should it be done or how can it be done better, rather than this is how it should be. And if it happens,
even children can corrupt their parents. This is a Quranic idea. Do you know where it's from? This is a question to both of you. In Surah Al-Kahf, that kid killed.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and this is one of the questions that goes against Islam is kind of the obviously it's ethics and bioethics. So I'm not going to bore you with this, but this uses a utilitarian idea of kind of ethics, that you do something for the greater good, and this is the only place in the Quran where it kind of goes against. And how as kind of Muslims do we understand this then? And the story was, for those who don't know, in Surah Al-Kahf.
This is going to get really long, man.
I don't have the time, by the way.
Oh, we've got a few minutes left, but I think if we're going to go into that story and then start discussing and how we understand it, that's going to take really long, man.
Let me just summarize the story then, and then we'll leave it at that. It's in the Quran, so it's accessible to all. In the Quran, in Surah Al-Kahf, Allah describes certain stories for us as lessons, as ayat, as miraculous signs, and we should recite Surah Al-Kahf every Friday. It's a recommended.
Oh yeah, I do a Surah Al-Kahf class, by the way, every Thursday night. If anyone wants to come.
Okay, Thursday night is technically Friday as well. So
it's paying, man. It's a paying class. Thursday nights on Zoom. Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry.
Surah Al-Kahf, obviously, there's so many reasons we can discuss, and this is going to take forever. Why we read Surah Al-Kahf on a Friday? Why we read Surah Al-Kahf as a protection from Dajjal, the Antichrist? We spoke about the Antichrist in previous episodes, but why we read that. But in the Surah Al-Kahf, Allah talks about the story of Musa alayhi salam, And Musa alayhi salam said he was the most, when someone asked him, came to him and said, who is the most knowledgeable on the earth? And he said, obviously out of his understanding and rationale, that I am, because he understood from his logic that I'm the messenger, I'm one of the messengers of God, and I have knowledge from the unseen because I get wahi. So based on that, he is the most knowledgeable. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, through his infinite wisdom, he guided Musa alayhi salam to one of his servants who has knowledge, min ladunna ilma, ilmul ladunni. So it's a knowledge that comes directly from Allah. A knowledge of the unseen that wasn't available to Musa alayhi salam. And Musa alayhi salam went to this person to learn. So Musa alayhi salam was the student, even though he was a prophet at this point. So Musa alayhi salam goes to this individual, and this individual says to him, and we don't know his name for sure. Some people call him Khidr. There's different ways of pronouncing it. And Khidr literally means green. And I think they attribute it to the greenery and kind of wildlife which he has kind of dominion over. Wallahu ta'ala alam. But anyway, this individual, he is the teacher of Musa alayhi salam, and Musa alayhi salam asks him, can I accompany you to learn knowledge? And he said no, because you will not be able to have patience. So that's the first thing we learn. You need patience to seek knowledge. Seeking knowledge requires patience. But the point of this story was he did things. This individual did things that went against the logic of Musa alayhi salam, because Musa alayhi salam was a prophet, and he came with divine ethics that Allah taught him, through scripture, which Allah already had revealed to him. And this guy went and he started breaking up these ships, and then he went and he got this little boy, and he crushed the little boy's head with a stone, and he killed him. And then he went, and these people were really nasty to them, and they didn't give them kind of they weren't hospitable to them when they needed like shelter and stuff. And he went and helped them, and he built this wall for them. And they were like, and then Musa alayhi salam was like, why? And then he said, if you say why one more time, then you can't accompany me. And then he did, and then he revealed to him the reasons why he did these things. And about the child, he said the child had two pious parents, and Allah wanted to keep the kind of child away, from the parents away from this child who potentially would have corrupted them. But Wallahu ta'ala alam, this was a divine kind of logic. It doesn't really make sense if we were to apply our rationale behind. Although people have made attempts to, if we look at different tafsirs, people
so how do we understand the story?
Yeah, that is interesting.
That's a question to you. Now I've said my bit. How do you understand the story?
Okay, I'm just going to go through a couple of the comments. DMAC is saying sometimes what we do is we pass on to our kids what we wish that we had known. So we kind of overstep the line. And DMAC is also saying bravery with understanding of risks and possible outcomes is important. Bravery by itself can be dangerous. And Dr. Ramali is saying any teenagers will take risks. When they become adults, the risks will be measured. So as babies, I think the point that we're saying is that we might take more risks than we really should. Unmeasured risk, limitless risk. And by taking that risk beyond what we should, then that can actually be dangerous. And you have to kind of control that. You have to bring that into control. But then I think the question which I then said is, does this obsession with controlling risk and being safe, does that actually limit our potential? Does that make sense? So I think it's the balance. There has to be a line.
Dr. Ramali mentioned a really good point. He said earlier in the comments, I was just scrolling up, middle path and trust the children. Having a middle approach to it, because there can be one extreme, which Bilal spoke about when he said, oh no, you have to do this is my way, the highway, this is the only way. And then there's another extreme where you let them do anything they want. Yeah, DJ, go for it, bacha. And then you can be a DJ and maybe come back to the religion.
But I think here's the question, like in that middle path, would the child decide because of the way you've nurtured him, or would you decide for him? I think that's kind of the crux of it. So when do you step in?
But you can try all you want, as in you can try your best to nurture the child, but the child might make completely different decisions that you want a favorable outcome to you. It might be completely different to what the child thinks. And you can try all you want, as in if Allah decides. That's what Mufti Shabbir says, isn't it? With the famous statement, "Tadbir insan, taqdeer ilahi ke tabi hai." So based on that, it's like you need to make dua to Allah. It's a divine thing in it. Allah can destine a destination for the child. And you said the children of prophets, Nuh alayhi salam's son, he's like, Nuh alayhi salam's son, come ASAP, come right. This is what's best for you. But Musa, Nuh alayhi salam said, using his logic, Dad, I'm gonna take refuge on this mountain. Sa'awi ila jabal yasimuni min al-ma. I'm gonna take this refuge on this mountain. And logically, if I'm on a top place, then how is the flood water gonna reach me? And Nuh alayhi salam, out of emotion, he was saying, get on right now. Ya bunayya, he uses a term of affection. Oh, my little son. This son was at an age to make a decision for himself, but he still calls him, oh, my little baby son. Do you know how you would address minhaj kind of thing? So but even then, he disobeyed him and he died. La asima al-yawm min amrillahi illa man rahim. There is no savior from Allah. Nuh alayhi salam said an absolute statement that there is no savior.
Yeah, so definitely. So the point is here. So how do we find, where's that balance? Let's draw a line then. I do like drawing lines. So how do we draw a line between
There's no line. It's just simple. There is no line. That's the one. We take the Hanafi opinion of utruk ala.
Okay, utruk ala mubtala bihi.
Because it's different for different people.
Yeah, absolutely.
You have to figure it out. Rapid prototyping. You have to figure out as you go along. Unfortunately, people think everyone has it worked out.
Nobody has it worked out. But there would be some way of determining whether somebody's way too cautious or whether somebody's taking way too many risks or not.
There's no objective way now.
Ask the child.
There's no objective way, because the child would just say, my parents are too strict. They want me to go to Darul Uloom. They want me to become a scholar because they want paradise for themselves. So it's a selfish motivation for them sticking me in the madrasa. But wallahu alam,
But I would say that there's more importance than that would actually be like if you understand that the child's unfolding as a being of its own, rather than something. Because if you're not meant to influence it, how much are you meant to influence it, or are you really meant to be bothered about influencing it? Because if it's meant to unfold on its own, then, and we have examples of messengers not being able to do it, then like surely that's taking a step back rather than being more involved.
I'm just curious, Jawad Ahmed, are you Jawad Ahmed from Darul Uloom Bolton?
I believe so.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sure he is.
Okay, because there's so many Jawads, there's two Jawads from Darul Uloom Bolton.
There is, yeah.
Might be either or. Who's DMAC? MashaAllah, they have some.
DMAC is saying that the Prophet ﷺ said that man la yarham, la yurham. And Dr. Muhammad Sathiq is saying children are a beautiful display picture, mashallah. Children will develop inclination to pursue a career path depending on the set of natural strengths they have from it. That would be beautiful. Yes, I love this one. This is exactly what I mean. The set of natural strengths, the thing that Allah created you to do. That's perfect if that happens, if they have an inclination. But then that inclination definitely exists, that desire exists. But what if that desire is, the question I'm asking is, how much is that desire kind of pressed down and pushed away, that you can't have that desire, that's too big, that's too risky, and instead they're kind of pushed onto something safe. I think that's kind of the point there.
This natural strength idea, a few months ago we asked this, we were in this group and we asked this plastic surgeon, how do you know you haven't got the hands for it? So there's this thing about obviously being a medical doctor and being a surgeon. So surgeons are known to have this manual dexterity, and they're meant to be good at like stitching and blah blah blah. And then someone asked this plastic surgeon, it was like teaching us, how do you know you haven't got the hands for it? Well, at what point do you decide you haven't got the hands for it?
What do you mean, as in due to when you start retiring?
No, as in when you're choosing to do this career.
Oh, okay.
And then that was such an interesting question based on like learning things. And when you decide you can't do it, he said something so amazing. The Scottish plastic surgeon. He said, with the right, I'm paraphrasing him, but he said it such a profound way. He said, with the right training and like conditioning, anyone can achieve anything. And it's about the conditioning, not about. No one has the hands for it to start with. No one has the hands for it. As in, with that conditioning, and perhaps people will have to work harder to
Bilal,
achieve it.
Bilal, that reminds me of that thing he mentions about mastery in the video. You know, like because we decide like when we see a bicycle for the first time. Do you remember that bit? Seeing a bicycle for the first time, and then
no, I'm not sure. Go on.
Oh, okay. So, like for example, in that Tom Chi video, who is very pro rapid prototyping, is that when you see a bicycle for the first time, it's like wow, it's a whole new thing which has come into your life. So nobody starts reading books on bicycles. Nobody reads all the theory about it. But you actually get into it, and when you actually get into it and start practicing, then the first thing that you'll do will be just you trying. And it's going to be by doing it, not by reading the book, that you're going to get the mastery. So I guess in terms of this, like sometimes I think, and this is one of the points which is making that sometimes we actually limit ourselves in terms of our career or the thing that we do every day, or like Imad's saying here, like not being able to pick something up because we try and understand it before actually engaging, before just practicing, before just going with the flow kind of thing.
Learn by practice, not by theory, sort of thing.
Yeah. Sahil saying, what does Hayyakumullahu Jami'a? Or may Allah give you all life.
Allah wake you all up.
Hayyakum. May Allah give you energy. Hayyakum. Give you the energy of life, the breath of life. Jawad Ahmad was in Mustafa's class apparently.
G.
And then Dr. Sadiq.
The brother from Sheffield.
Is it him?
Oh yeah.
Shaykh Jawadun.
Is it him? Is he still alive?
MashaAllah.
Interesting.
Jawad, the name of Allah.
Are you sure it's the Sheffield guy?
Yeah, definitely. He's the one who graduated myself.
Children form likes, dislikes when they grow up with their exposure and eventually settle in one of the overlapping career paths with the. Hopefully, I mean, that would be ideal. I do hope that happens. And if parents are kind of nurturing that the best out of their children, then that's something. Dr. Ramani said building trust with the child is very important, and I think we're going to have to draw to an end. But based on what Dr. Ramani is saying, I think, like, again, there's a line between being friends with your kid and them being really open, and also having that father kind of or mother presence over them.
It's only been 2 days and he's got all this other advice.
I'm trying to learn something, man. But Dr. Ramali is saying that you build trust. It's really important to build trust so that you're actually speaking to them. And I know from my experience, when you don't trust somebody, you don't want to tell them anything. So you try and hide things. And you really don't want your kid doing that from you. You want them, if they've got things going on, they come and tell you straight away. Bilal, do you want to say some things? And then
I just want to say it was an absolute pleasure being with you two, Shaykh, and just listening to you week in, week out, and getting the opportunity to participate this week, man. It's been an absolute pleasure. Imad and Habib, both my seniors in knowledge, and whom I both take. I take much from both of you, honestly. Wallahi, just a pleasure, man. I'll just end on that.
Jazakallah khair, man. Amazing. And just in terms of guests, we are looking for guests for our podcast. Are we, Imad? I don't know. Imad's in charge around here. We are looking for more guests, and inshallah, as we go down, hopefully, I'll be reaching out to people. If anybody is interested in coming on, and it doesn't have to be somebody who studied the alim course or done hifz of the Quran like Shaykh Bilal. It could be just even somebody. I think Imad's more keen. Anybody, even in the professional field, somebody who's got their own business and wants to discuss that journey. Doctors, people who are currently working with the NHS, anything which would be interesting. Even Muslims who've just been part of the local community, it'd be interesting. So please do reach out, inshallah, to me or Shaykh Imad. And Imad, you've got a couple of minutes just to wrap up, inshallah.
I think based on the guesting, I think everyone can bring something to the table. Everyone's unique. Everyone, Allah has given them, a special quality that they can, share with us, inshallah, and we can have many discussions and draw upon many kind of realities through these discussions as well. So I think don't be shy. all the people, Bilal has been with us since the first week. It's taken us 15 weeks to kind of invite him on, but alhamdulillah, he's finally on. And we prayed that Allah keeps us consistent, because loads of people start things and we don't really finish. We commit for 2-3 kind of weeks, and then this comes up and that comes up. But Allah's placed a real blessing in this. I think that we're able to commit for 15 weeks pretty much at the same time. Things have come. I've been in the car, I've been in different places. You've been in the car as well last week.
Yeah, last week. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we were, so wherever we are, this consistency is the key to anything good, I think. I don't know if it says other Talibin actually, so it must be hadith. The best of actions is those which are done continuously, even though they are like small in nature. So if you do حب الأعمال إلى الله سبحانه وتعالى ما دام is it? Okay. Even though they are little, or you might think of them as insignificant, but no action, no good deed, or nothing that we strive to do with good intentions is insignificant in the eyes of our Maker. So that's just a deep spiritual point that I wanted to finish on, because usually you're the spiritual one, but today I've taken this I didn't have show and tell this week, because the only time I did do show and tell.
Don't worry about it. But inshallah, it will be good to hear from any of the audience, inshallah. Whoever
show and tell this week.
We've got more doctors here, and we've got, mashallah, even these people that I don't know, Shaykh Jawad Ahmad, Shaykh Abdul Alim. It would be lovely to have him on. We can talk about.
Is he here?
He said hi.
Shaykh
Ayub, and we're doing the da'wah apparently.
Can I do my show and tell then?
Hurry up, man.
My show and tell.
Him and show and tell is obsessed, man.
Is Birrul Walidain.
Oh, did you see Mufti Abu Lay's video? The one where he's laughing.
Which one?
He always laughs.
Jumal Mia is asking the special guest. Special guest is Sheikh Bilal. We're looking for more special guests. So Sheikh Jumal Mia, if you want to come as well, get in touch with Imad.
Yeah, Jumal Mia will come on at one point, inshallah. He's a specialist in the field of chemistry. He's more chemistry Olana.
Yeah. No, but seriously, it's an open invite. It's not. There's no like special people who we want more than other people. Whoever you are, and especially if you got experience on podcasts and stuff, definitely. But
that's what I really wanted. I wanted Bilal to be part of our first guest. So alhamdulillah, he's been part of us from the beginning. We have other very regular people that we have as well.
Yeah, mashallah. Let's give a bit of a shout out. Like Sahil.
Ian is our guy.
Sheikh Dr. Ramali.
Ramali is our guy.
This is Dr. Muhammad Sathik. I think it's the first time I've seen him in the comments. But alhamdulillah, he's from Colchester. He's a very experienced doctor, mashallah. I don't know much about doctors, as you can see. Alhamdulillah. And obviously Sheikh Abdul Alim will hopefully come.
Sister Gulsar wasn't here today.
I don't think so.
Unfortunate. Maybe she'll catch up later, but shout out to her as well.
Inshallah. Okay, Jazakallah khair, everyone. Assalamu alaikum. Shall we end it there?
Okay.
Okay, Jazakallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.